That is where I believe my party has failed. And I think my party needs to stop listening to consultants who are so far removed from the people who are struggling.
Anytime he's had a guest who's challenged his incredible bias on the question of Israel and Palestine in particular, those guests never appear on Bill Maher's show again.
There's something going on there that people don't want to talk about, but he had a populist appeal that transcended tribalism, that people did not identify with their particular superficial appearance for this election.
Put your money where your mouth is and have a Palestinian or a Palestinian-American guest on your show.
They suppressed Bernie, right? You had the super delegates, right? After that, Biden was picked to run against Trump. Then you had Kamala, who's picked to run against Trump.
So first of all, no, a mandate to shove stuff down Americans' throats like he's doing, that was not done.
He was elected president of the United States.
People said if he closes the border and we have legal only immigration, he's going to lose a Hispanic vote for a generation. And lo and behold, he won more Hispanic votes than any Republican in history.
That there is a consensus on this in the world scientific community is the reason the world is coming together to deal with this. They're saying you can't
There's
prioritize
no consensus on anything.
Are you a climate change denier? I think that's a relevant question here.
No, I'm not. But I'm not sure
You're not.
that, what are you, a climate change exaggerator or fanaticist?
Reason why nobody can afford home insurance anymore is because climate change is devastating the coasts, and these insurance companies can tell.
Everything is more expensive since Trump was in office. Everything here in Texas. It's where I live.
The inflation rate was 2.4. When Donald Trump left office, the inflation rate was 1.8 in 2021.
Exactly.
And people were warning Democrats, Larry Summers in particular, do not do this Build Back Better inflation rate. You're going to print $7 trillion.
So when people are telling us that the economy is great, it's like they're peeing on us and telling us it's raining. It's just not right.
Do you actually think that's Donald Trump's? Wait, you're blaming that on Donald Trump?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, got another Piers Morgan Uncensored coming down the pipeline for you guys, and we're going to get into all kind of topics. Everything from what's going on in Gaza to the government shutdown to AI and the TikTok feed. All kinds of nonsense that is going on in this day and age, and everything in between, folks. And we're going to get into this discussion, and it's going to be good. It's going to be really good. It's going to be the best, as a matter of fact. Like nothing you've ever seen. But you guys do me a favor, smash that like button for me, subscribe if you're new around here, share this video anywhere and everywhere you can, and click that join button, sign up and become a member. And check out my regular videos, by the way, because we go over news, and I kind of show you guys how you're being manipulated by the corporate press, because you are definitely being manipulated by headline news these days, folks. They don't give you both sides of the story. They just try to portray a narrative. And that's not very nice, folks, because the news should be held to account, just like the government, right? But y'all do all that for me, and let's just go ahead and get into this.
This is Van Jones on the Bill Maher show. Let's take a listen.
Isn't part of that because we had to fold everything into critical race theory, and somehow the Middle East became part of,
I see it differently. And I love this conversation because I think people, those of us who went to college, give a lot more credit to college courses for how the world works than I do. This is not about critical race theory on college campuses. This is about Iran. Iran and Qatar have come up with a disinformation campaign that they are running through TikTok and Instagram that is massive. If you are a young person, you open up your phone and all you see is dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby,
right.
Diddy, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby. That's basically your whole feed. So that's not DEI. That is a geopolitical adversary that is deliberately trying to divide the West against itself.
Now, understandably, that provoked a lot of outrage because it was clearly a pretty crass thing to say, and the sort of laughter seemed very inappropriate to what he said. He then apologised on X, saying, I made a comment on Real Time with Bill Maher about the war in Gaza that was insensitive and hurtful. I apologise. The suffering of the people of Gaza, especially the children, is not a punchline. I'm sorry it came over that way. What's happening to children in Gaza is heartbreaking. And he goes on to, again, reiterate his apology. It's a very sincere apology. But I think the point I would make, Jordan, about that was these are real images that you see. I mean, it's not part of a disinformation campaign coming from anyone. You know, I see it all day long on my social media. And the reality about this war and why I think Israel has become more and more unpopular, this government, in the way it's prosecuted the war, is that for the first time, a younger generation in particular are able to follow this in real time with real images of babies getting killed on an hourly basis in Gaza. That is a fact. And I think the social media pressure has played a massive part, I think, in potentially bringing Netanyahu to heel here.
I guess it's a fact. I mean, but here's the thing. I don't believe a single thing I see on TikTok anymore. I can barely use TikTok now because it's mostly AI. I'm not saying it's not happening. All I'm saying is to look at social media and believe anything you see anymore is almost like insane. It's like I think that like 80 to 90% of my feed is not real.
Really?
So, and again, yeah. Yes, and it's not just with Gaza. I'm talking everything. It's just like everything that you see with lions jumping up and trying to catch their babies in the air that are being taken by hawks. I mean, it's nonstop. So it's very, very difficult right now to look at social media, look at these feeds, and really know that anything you're seeing is actually real. And I'm not saying it's not real. All I'm saying is that it's really sad, but I used to go on TikTok. I used to go on Instagram. And Instagram is not as bad, by the way, but I used to go on TikTok and try to get some news. And now I find it impossible to find anything meaningful there because I'm always questioning, is what I'm seeing real? Is what I'm seeing propaganda? And it's probably just AI. So, again, I don't put any stock in anything I see on social media. That's where I stand on it.
You know, Victor, I mean, that is a disturbing reality. I mean, I'll come to the Van Jones thing in a moment, but I've noticed the same trend that more and more stuff I'm seeing is clearly AI. AI is getting more and more exponentially powerful minute by minute. You know, I was with a surgeon in LA playing golf recently who said that he'd had 3 weeks away from his workplace to go off and do something. And when he came back, the rate of progress of AI in his area was off the charts in 3 weeks. And we were talking about what that means for medicine and health. And obviously, it could mean incredibly exciting things. But in other areas, it can also be very dangerous. You know, what do you feel about the AI part of all this?
Well, let me just say one more thing as well. So you combine that with also the fact that the algorithm's showing you more and more of what they think you want to see.
Right.
So people who are, pro-Gaza are getting fed that like in spades. People who are pro-Israel are seeing their own feed. So you're taking AI, then combining it with that they want to keep you seeing what they think you want to see. So everyone ends up in their own echo chamber. We end up getting more divided. Everything seems more exaggerated. And again, if one baby's killed, it's one baby too many in my book. Okay, but again, I don't even know what to say anymore because, what do you believe at this point? And I really think there needs to be something on TikTok and Instagram, anywhere. It has to be, really disclosed. Is this real or is this being generated with AI?
Right.
I think it's a really important point.
I mean, he's totally right about that. You go and look into your feeds sometimes, and they're going to feed you what you want to watch, folks. This is why I always say I'm constantly watching left-wing news, constantly watching what's going on with the left, listening to what they're saying, because we don't want to get in our own bubbles, folks. And I've been accused of being in the bubble a lot, but it's ridiculous, folks. I read left-wing news all day long. That's all I do. And I would honestly suggest everybody do that. If you're a left-winger, go read right-wing news and watch podcasts. Watch this show, for crying out loud, because I consider myself to be a conservative. I lean to the right. I'm not hardcore right or anything like that. But, we got to listen to each other, folks. And we will find that we have a lot more in common than we don't, as a matter of fact. But let's keep going because we got a little bit more on this segment.
I mean, Omar Badr, what did you think of what Van Jones said?
Look, I mean, obviously, we know for a fact that the killing of children in Gaza is absolutely real. It's, again, documented by Western doctors, including American Jewish doctors, who go and see and say that there is a systematic targeting of Palestinian children with sniper bullets from the Israeli military. So that is a fact. And you look at what human rights organizations report on entire families being wiped out. Now, of course, if Van Jones had said what he said about Jewish children in the aftermath of a massacre of Jewish children, we know he would not be working at CNN anymore. But right now, because as long as you're dehumanizing Palestinians, then a passing apology on Twitter ends up doing the trick and people just move on. But one thing that I think is really important here is that the person who should be called out is Bill Maher himself, who constantly praises right-wingers and Republicans about being open to sharing ideas and open debate. His entire brand is open debate and conversation. And you'll notice, Piers, in 2 years of this genocide of Gaza, Bill Maher has not had a single Palestinian or Palestinian-American guest on his show. He has not had a single person to challenge the Israeli narrative on this. He is constraining the limits of that debate in a way that is completely off-brand for him, for somebody who always brags about being open to conversations. And if you look at even the past beyond that, anytime he's had a guest who's challenged his incredible bias on the question of Israel and Palestine in particular, those guests never appear on Bill Maher's show again. So frankly, if you're going to claim to be a free speech warrior and you're going to say that you're open for discussion and debate on no matter what the topic is, put your money where your mouth is and have a Palestinian or a Palestinian American guest on your show to educate you about this genocide denial that he's engaged in. He has yet to do that. And one last point, Piers, on TikTok. You have right now, Israelis see that TikTok is a problem for them because there's an unfiltered feed of this genocide. And that's why Benjamin Netanyahu himself said it was incredibly important for this purchase of TikTok to Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, being really important to push a pro-Israel perspective. They're letting us know that this purchase is about shifting the algorithms within TikTok to tamp down what the public sees about what Israel's doing in Gaza and to push a pro-Israel narrative. And anybody who's in favor of free speech and open access to information should be extremely concerned about the fact that the Israeli prime minister is talking openly about the fact that this purchase of TikTok is about shifting the discourse in favor of Israel and denying its atrocities.
Jolanda Jones, I mean, I do think this whole issue of AI and tech and social media is getting ever bigger because of its influence over so many impressionable young minds. There's no doubt the algorithms from these companies deliberately target people in a certain way, and they do it for financial reasons. Should federal governments generally be doing a lot more to try and bring these companies to heel in a way that regulates this kind of thing?
Well, yes, Piers, I agree with you that AI has taken over. I believe that AI needs to be regulated, but I think that more and more people are going to rely on AI because mainstream media basically censors people. And then whoever buys TikTok or whatever social media company, they're going to lead it in the way that they go, which is why I believe that people, and not just young people, I think older people are in search of the truth, and it's just hard to find it. I mean, right now, again, you see the AI where the lion's jumping up or something because somebody took the cub, and that may or may not be AI. There's not even a way to be able to figure out what the truth is. That is what is so crazy. And I think Van Jones was wrong with what he did. He took something very serious and he made it the butt of a joke. Peace in the Middle East should be very, very, very important to people. We need to figure it out. And going back to what you asked me before about whether Donald Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, winning the Nobel Peace Prize is more than just about peace. I mean, actually, if there's peace in the Middle East, some kind of way Donald Trump can claim credit for it, which I don't know that that's going to happen, then I think we need to consider other things as well. But AI right now is out of control in every arena. But I don't know, like even when I went on my social media this morning and it says, do you want to check something that says AI generated? If I check that it's AI, then it'll say it's AI. If I don't check that it's AI, even if it is AI, then no one's going to know that it's AI. So I think it's just very hard to do that. But just because something rolls across my social media feed, and it may not be pleasant to see like people dying, doesn't mean it's AI. And I just think it's very difficult to discern what's the truth and what's a lie. But I absolutely believe that AI and smartphones have changed the way the world looks at things, even like with police brutality. People never believed it existed till someone had a phone and they caught it. And so I think it's absolutely a problem. I think governments need to regulate it, but I don't even know because of the exponential growth growth and how rapidly AI is moving forward. When we figure out a way to regulate it one way, it's going to be eons down the road.
Right.
As you said, you were golfing with a surgeon. He said he was gone for 3 weeks, and in 3 weeks it changed that much. So I think that we will always be chasing a way to regulate AI, and that in and of itself is the danger of AI.
Yeah, okay, so this is one of those positions that I think just about everybody can get on board with because, you know, it's a very, very unique danger that AI poses to humanity that we've never seen before, right? We just don't know the dangers that AI impose, right? We can guess, we can think, we can prognosticate on what we think AI is going to do or what we think, you know, the ramifications of doing this will do, you know, the good that comes from it, the bad and the ugly and everything in between. But we just don't know. We have no idea. So just about everybody's unified on the fact that AI poses a threat that yeah, we need a lot of regulation on AI, and just about everybody agrees with that, you know, but then you got to balance free speech and all this other nonsense. But free speech for AI, I don't think too many people really care about all that much. It's more free speech of the creator, whoever's, you know, typing in the prompts to the AI. I think that's more about that free speech issue right there. But, you know, getting back to what Van Jones said, sure, it was a little bit crass. I'll give him that. But, I mean, what is the problem with the truth? People have an issue with being offended, and I don't know why. Like, sure, get out there and voice that, but why admonish somebody for something as mundane as saying that? I mean, it's the truth. It's the absolute truth. That's what you see, right? Like, I've talked about this before, that, you know, kids 10 years ago when social media was first starting to come around, you would get like police brutality videos like what she was talking about. That's all you see is police brutality, police brutality, police brutality, police brutality. Then you'll see something else, right? Something totally unrelated. And then just back more to police brutality. So you have an entire generation of kids that believe that thousands of unarmed black men are being killed or beat up by cops every single year, and it's just not the truth. Folks, this is why I always tell people, do your research. It's a shame that we have to go and fact check the fact bringers, right? The corporate press, the news, that's what they're supposed to do. That is what I do on this channel. I just do these videos right here just for fun, just so I can kind of lighten the mood or whatever and just run my mouth and ramble on as long as I want to, right? But for the vast majority of the videos I make, we read the news, and I go and do research to figure out if they're telling the truth or not. And as we're reading through that news, I will point out any sort of manipulative language that they use to try to make you think, you know, down a certain line of thought, right? Instead of thinking what it should be, what actually happened. You know, I kind of know the truth before going in, so when I'm reading these things, I can point all this nonsense out. And they do it. Just about every paragraph is some sort of manipulation, even the structure of the news articles, folks. And that's not even to mention the mainstream narrative machine, right? Your pundits on TV manipulating the crap out of everything, right? They manipulate all their language because they're trying to portray a narrative. They're not trying to give you the facts. And that's a damn shame, folks. It really, really is. But we must be vigilant on these issues. We must use our skeptical, critical thinking skills to listen to something and not think, well, you know, the Trump administration is just being evil just for the sake of being evil. That doesn't make sense. It's the same thing with Democrats being evil just for the sake of being evil. That's just not how reality works, folks. Yes, there are evil people out there that just are evil just for the sake of being evil. But those are like your serial killers, the cartels, for crying out loud, terrorists like Antifa. These people, yeah, sure, that's evil. But your run-of-the-mill Democrat, no, they're no different than you. Your run-of-the-mill conservative, they're not much different than you are. We need to come together on these issues and once again realize that the moderate position, there's a lot more moderates out there that maybe lean left or lean right than there are extremities. Let's keep going.
But to some other issues, notably, what's the state of the US economy right now? You know about this stuff better than most people. Where is the reality of where the US economy is? I remember when Trump launched his his Liberation Day, his global tariff war. A lot of people predicting complete Armageddon. US economy would be destroyed within 6 months. Well, we're 6 months further on. Stock markets are record highs. The economy seems to be in pretty good shape in the United States. Other people say the real impact of all this tariff stuff is still to come. How do you see things? Today's show is brought to you by Oxford Natural, makers of the Optimum Day and Optimum Night, all natural supplements. Full edition Piers. And here's the best part. Use the...
No, I think the economy's in good shape, and I don't think tariffs are going to make that much of an impact at all. I think what really causes inflation is printing money. And this is not, tariffs don't print money, so money is not being printed the way it was. And I think more importantly, there's two major problems with the U.S. economy. And, one is the fiscal deficit. It's $37 trillion, which is just a looming nightmare that's going to have to be addressed at one point or another. Elon Musk tried, got nowhere. It's a complicated problem, but it has to be addressed. And the second thing I think, which is really important, is home affordability. So because, they printed so much money over the last, 15, 20 years, right? What happens is hard assets like real estate go flying up in value, especially with all the printing during COVID, right? So you have all these young people now. It's how do they buy their first home? And that's a really big problem because, home ownership is a fundamental, core principle of the so-called American dream. And it's also the way that people used to build wealth. And right now, for most people, unless you have a wealthy parent or something, or you have an extraordinarily high income from the start, you have kids that are graduating from college riddled with student debt they have to pay off. Home ownership is out of reach. People aren't getting married as quickly. They're not having babies as quickly. So I think you have fundamental problems. I think the economy itself is fine right now, but these are looming issues that need to be addressed.
Joe, you're shaking your head. Why?
Well, I just think Pierce, I think this topic is really straightforward. When you just look at the data, Donald Trump inherited the strongest, by far, post-COVID economy of any industrialized nation in the world, not even close. And right now, inflation is up, things cost more, and job growth is stalling. Why? Because of his tariffs and the instability. The average small business owner in America right now, their head is spinning because they don't know what's happening. So I think he was handed a really strong economy. And I think he single-handedly, because this is on him, he's messed it up.
Victor, what do you think?
Well, we know the jobs report was inaccurate. The last jobs report that showed a substantial gain in job growth, that was inaccurate. We know that Joe Biden, I don't know how you can say he had the strongest economy. In 2022-23, we had 9.1% inflation, and it went down to 2.5. But cumulatively in staple goods, food, insurance, etc., when he left office, prices in those key areas were about 25% higher than when he started, and wage growth never got close to approximating that. The big thing to watch is we're in kind of a readjustment. He says that we have $10 to $15 trillion in foreign investment. If that were to be true, and there are ratios that for every $1 billion in foreign investment, depending on the area in which it's invested, you get job growth. But we don't know to what degree the Saudis or the Japanese or the South Koreans or the Europeans are going to follow through on that. It's easy to promise that, but we'll have to see if that comes in before the midterms. The second thing is we've never seen this push for fuel. And there's new federal leases, there's green lighting on natural gas. You talk to people, economists, a lot of them are worried that Trump has promised liquid natural gas to the Japanese, to the South Koreans, to the Europeans, and we may not even be able to supply that. We thought we had a surplus, but there's going to be an enormous growth in energy, and I don't know when that will kick in, but that will help. And of course, deregulation and encouragement. Part of it is just telling people there is uncertainty, but a lot of the uncertainty is readjusting and saying to people, I'm not going to regulate you. You bring in the Silicon Valley people. It's kind of like the World War II War Production Board. You say, you know what? I'm not going to over-regulate you. I'm not going to pick winners and losers, but I do want you to do things in the interest of the United States, invest in the United States, bring jobs here, do not outsource, do not offshore. So we're in a transition, but we don't really know the ultimate effect, but it could be very good in a year from now.
I'll think that there's something, just on this note. When we talk about job numbers, it's really important to note the fact that when the Labor Statistics Department put out jobs report saying that the projection that Trump had about how many jobs we're going to gain had not materialized, Trump fired the head of that office. So Trump is waging a war on truth. It doesn't matter what the reality is going to be. Trump is dedicated to the idea of shifting public perceptions in favor of pretending that he's the greatest thing that ever happened to this country, regardless of what the facts may show. And his entire tariffs policy, when you're looking at, how much chaos and whatever, I think there's a very fundamental logic underneath that so-called chaos, which is Trump's entire way that he functions in the world is that all these tariffs are being put in place on countries and then being promised to be taken down in exchange for these countries doing favors for Trump's tech bros, his friends, his billionaires. It's all about cutting deals that benefit Trump and Trump's closest circles, not American workers. And that's even gets to a more absurd level if you look at the tariffs that were placed on Brazil, where it was about whether Brazil is going to prosecute Bolsonaro, Trump's friend, former president. And those were the basis on which tariffs were being put. This is not how tariffs are supposed to work. Tariffs are supposed to be in place to help American workers and the American economy. And Trump, like he always does, this is about him and about his friends and about bullying other countries into getting what he wants done.
Pierce, one other just really quick important point. Trump's entire tariff regime, in my mind, is unconstitutional. And we may have a whole nother discussion on that, but the Supreme Court it'll get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could rule next year that all of these tariffs are unconstitutional. They've got to stop. And who knows?
But why are they unconstitutional? Why are they unconstitutional?
Even if the Supreme Court does that, the damage is done. And as I sit and I listen about how well the economy is doing or not doing, you can talk above people's heads all you want to. The people on the ground, the people that I know are struggling. Times are worse than they've ever been. People can't afford eggs. People can't afford gas. People can't afford a place to live. People can't afford daycare. People's schools are underfunded. So people are talking about how great the economy is. It is not great. And it has a lot to do with the tariffs. But I think that most people aren't paying attention to what the GDP is. Most people aren't paying attention to Trump's fake news. And I don't believe a word that's coming out of any government, federal government agency's mouths about anything. When we looked at the HUD website, the federal government, Trump literally had the radical left on there. So everything that he puts up is AI. Everything that he puts up is fake. And I'm telling you,
well, there is such a, hang on, Jolanda, there is such a thing as the radical left. I mean, they exist.
It shouldn't be on a government website. Okay, it shouldn't.
Trump
should not be playing Monopoly. Trump should not be playing Monopoly with real people's lives. And that is exactly what he's doing. And I will say this again, the people on the ground who can't find work, who, if they are working, they're not being paid a living wage. People literally cannot afford groceries. I'm literally out at food insecurity, food giveaways to people who literally every other week, every 2 weeks, are coming for fruits and vegetables and protein because they can't afford it. People are starving to death in this country because the economy sucks. So when people are telling us that the economy is great, it's like they're peeing on us and telling us it's raining. It's just not right. It's not right.
Okay, so this issue, clearly, this is where people's objectivity is getting in front of their bias and they don't want to tell the truth here. Look, okay, so conservatives were screaming about the economy under Joe Biden, how it was terrible, it's the worst ever, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it was bad, and then it kind of chilled out a little bit, right? And it wasn't great. The economy hasn't changed. It's still not great. Look, I'm a full-on Trump supporter, right? And I love the tariffs, to be honest with you, but they are causing prices to go up. I find that a good thing, though. All right, now let me explain this, because once again, you know, the Democrats, they hate the tariffs. They say, oh, it's crushing jobs and it's crushing. Well, it's not. As a matter of fact, it's trying to save American jobs. It's trying to give to the middle class, to build out the middle class, right? This is one of those issues that it's going to take years for, you know, the effects to come to fruition from these tariffs. Yeah, prices are going to go up initially, and we're going to be paying a little bit more, but it's definitely not nearly as bad as Joe Biden's 9% inflation that absolutely could have been reduced. It didn't have to go up that high, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, all the countries, if they would have noticed the supply chain issues that were coming down the pipeline, they could have implemented measures to make sure that was not, you know, it didn't hit nearly as hard, in other words. But getting back to this issue, the tariffs are good because the left, they're constantly screaming about, oh, let's tax the corporations. Well, that's what Trump is doing. And they are actually advocating against it. They don't like it. Well, hang on just a second. They want to tax American corporations, and Donald Trump isn't doing that. He's actually giving them a tax break. He's giving you a tax break. He's giving everybody a tax break in the United States, and he's taxing these foreign companies. That's what he's doing. I've shown time and time again, and I've made my case for this. Look, your price is going to go up a little bit. And once again, but the vast majority of the tariff is being absorbed by these foreign corporations. As a matter of fact, I've made, I don't know, at least 10 videos right now of a news article that's supposed to be a gotcha on the Trump administration. Oh, look at this price going up. And then when you read into the details, you see, oh, well, they're raising prices by 3% or 4% or 5%. Well, hang on just a second. The tariff is 10%, 15% or 20%. Where's the rest of that percentile going? Where's the rest of that going? Oh, the company is absorbing it. So this is what's happening. Donald Trump keeps in place the tax policy, essentially giving you some decent tax breaks, right? If he would have let that lapse, taxes would have skyrocketed for everybody, as a matter of fact. So that's good. That's a tax break, right? That's what he does. And then says, okay, we're going to implement these tariffs, which is going to cause some prices to go up a little bit because he's going to get these foreign companies to pay the rest of that tariff. That's what's going on. Taxing the rich in the process. That's what Trump is doing. That's what the left is constantly screaming about, but they cannot allow for objectivity to wash away their bias. They are just going to say that Trump's tariffs are destroying the country. They're destroying everything. The economy is terrible. But these are the same people that were yelling and screaming about the economy is so good under Joe Biden when it wasn't. There's not been much changed about the economy. And let's get back to Trump's first term, right? Because a lot of people argue the economy was great back then. It was good. But it still wasn't where it needed to be, folks. Wages were coming up. That stalled when COVID hit, okay? We were on the right path. If Donald Trump would have remained in office, we wouldn't be getting a lot of what we're getting right now. So I'm kind of thankful in a sense that Donald Trump wasn't elected in 2020 so we could get the weaponization of the federal government under the Democrats to expose the Democrats for what they actually are, which is authoritarians. It is what it is. You know, the facts bear this out. But once again, it's problematic for the middle class because wages were actually coming up at a pretty good rate, right? And that stalled. That actually went back into the negative. It went way back down. COVID screwed up a good thing, as a matter of fact. And right now, wages aren't coming up. The economy is not any better than it was a year ago under Joe Biden. Let's just be fair about that. Right? The tariffs have made it an impossibility for that to be the case. I'm sorry. Prices are still going up. People still can't afford things. The housing prices need to come down. That's a major problem right there, right? It's not necessarily wage growth, right? Wage growth would help, but it's housing, it's grocery costs. And let's be honest, right? Let's be really honest about this. Prices are never going to go down, ever. I'm sorry. Sure, you might get a little bit of fluctuation here and there, but on a generally speaking, prices are going to always go up because inflation is always a positive number. Right? We would have to have a deflationary period for that to happen. And according to economists, that would be that would have a catastrophic effect on the economy. It would be bad, according to economists. I'm not an economic expert, so I really don't know, but I'm trying to be as fair as possible. Look, the economy is getting better. It is, but it's still not good because housing costs are still high. Grocery costs are still high due to the effects of the massive amount of inflation that absolutely didn't have to be that high. But, there's a lot of things. The cost of living is still high and wages aren't coming up. Donald Trump can't fix that overnight. But the policies he's put in place are setting ourselves up to have another 2019 where wage growth is outpacing inflation by a decent bit so we can try to get back some of that housing expense and some of the cost of living expense and get it back to normal. Let's just be fair about these things. I don't understand why these political pundits can't be just objective about these things. I don't get that one at all. Let's keep going.
There are things that we can't always account precise blame for. When you look at the fact that at the end of the Trump era, we've had COVID was pretty disruptive to the economy. During Biden, we've had global inflation that was not necessarily Biden's individual fault. In fact, Biden kept it lower in the US than in many other countries around the world. Those are factors that we can't account for. But what we can account for is the fact that Donald Trump is cutting food assistance to Americans who need it. He's cutting healthcare access to Americans who need it, kicking off millions of Americans off of Medicare and Medicaid, and he is increasing the military budget, pushing it to over $1 trillion. So we're seeing those priorities, and we're seeing these massive tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans, the billionaire class getting massive tax cuts. That is obviously an agenda that does not serve the American people. And that's the point. So it's not about disputing and trying to debate and figure out exactly who's to blame for minor shifts in the economy. The priorities of a government are present in the budgets that they present. And the Trump budget is clearly at the expense of working Americans and in favor of billionaires. And just one last point on insurance prices in places like California. The reason why nobody can afford home insurance anymore is because climate change is devastating the coasts. And these insurance companies can tell the fact that climate change is making the likelihood that these houses are going to be submerged at some point going up. And so people don't want to insure these houses anymore.
That is a complete fantasy.
If climate change is going to swallow up the... Oh, my God.
California insurance companies are getting out.
Oh, my God. Climate change.
California's people, they will not insure you because California has not allowed traditional fire protection and preventive practices that they use for 100 years. They do not allow to clean the forests. LA burned because they would not allow people to clean the hillsides because there was a reservoir that could have saved that was completely empty because the mayor was in Ghana, because the deputy mayor was under house arrest for phoning in a bomb threat, because the head of Los Angeles Water and Power was an utter incompetent, and because there was about 10 or 15% of the hydrants weren't even working. That could have been completely preventable. The Paradise Fire was preventable. The Aspen Fire, which is about 50 miles from me and came within about 200 yards of my house there, was preventable. Everybody agrees on that. You don't know what you're talking about. If you allow people to go in and clean the forest and clean it up, and then you allow people to go back to traditional thinning of the forest, it would have worked. But they don't do that here.
Are you a climate change denier? I think that's a relevant question here.
No, I'm not. But I'm not sure that... what are you, a climate change exaggerator or fanaticist? Because
exaggerator, literally, no, the fate of the planet depends on it.
I love the term.
We have records in California for about 100 years.
Say that again.
We don't have records we don't have records that are accurate in California for much more than 100 years.
We
don't know the degree to which we don't know the degree to which we don't know the degree
we've never seen before. No, I'm sorry. You don't even have to be a deep climate scientist to understand the fact that there is a consensus on this in the world scientific community. It's the reason the world is coming together to deal with this. They're saying you can't
There's no
prioritize
consensus
short-term
on
economic gain
anything. You don't have
at the expense
consensus.
Of the
Oh
eventual
my God.
destruction
It is
of the
climate
economy.
change is real. We've heard.
The
we've had
world is
more
not
than-
destructive.
All right, let me.
Okay, so I love this topic right here. For the longtime viewers of this channel, you guys know what's coming, right? Now, I love this because this is one of those situations, this is one of those topics that I was very interested in about 10 years ago. I actually read several studies, and what I found fascinating is every single one of those studies was inconclusive, folks. They could not conclude anything. I wonder why that is. We don't have an accurate records enough to make any conclusions for only about 100 years. So they don't know. What the consensus is that the climate is changing. Yes, but the climate is always changing. What we don't have consensus on is the result of that climate change. Many of these climate zealots, they believe that there's this red line that we're going to pass, or we've already passed it, and it's just going to be apocalypse, folks. The planet's going to explode, the sea levels are going to rise, and we're all going to be dead. Look, that's not how the climate works. The climate does not change that rapidly, and things just don't fall off a cliff and can't come back from it, folks. We've had levels of carbon dioxide that was much, much, much higher, and life still flourished on this planet, as a matter of fact. The polar caps melted, and guess what? Everything wasn't flooded. Right? It's insane, these people that are just alarmists just for the sake of being alarmists. The whole climate change agenda is a hoax. It's an absolute grift, folks. These people are trying to get money from you, and that's it. That's all they're doing. Because these same people, if they believed what they believed, they would not fly around on private jets. Absolutely. They would not buy beachfront property knowing that in 10 years it's going to be underwater. It's insane, folks. It's insane what these people do. They would know that buying carbon offsets to reduce your carbon footprint doesn't do a damn thing for the climate. It does nothing for the climate at all. Planting trees would help, but do they do that? Oh, they say they donate money, but not before giving it to an NGO that has overhead, that has an executive that needs a beachfront home and fly around in a private jet and drive a hypercar, whatever they drive, right? It's all a giant grift. Look, we need to be good stewards of the planet, right? We are changing the climate as humans. We absolutely are. But, other animals on this planet have also rapidly and vastly changed this climate. Like, look at the algification of the ocean. That wiped out 75% of ocean species, as a matter of fact. And there wasn't no technology. There wasn't no internal combustion engines floating around back then. No, but it destroyed a lot of life, right? That's just natural. These climate zealots are truly insane, y'all. They really, really are. Like this guy talking about the California fires. They try to blame that on climate change. Oh, it's all this extreme heat. Like, are you kidding me with that? No, they don't do proper forest maintenance in California. It's insane. Look, there are a number of factors as to why wildfires get started. Most of the time, it's because somebody flicked a cigarette butt onto some brush and it caught fire. It is what it is, folks, right? Sometimes, spontaneously, lightning will strike and cause a forest fire. It happens. That's not climate change, folks. That is absolutely not climate change. They try to say, oh, but look at all these powerful storms that have been coming in. If you look at the records, which we have for about maybe 200 years, yeah, the records don't say that. The record, sure, the storms are more powerful, but they're far more infrequent than they used to be 100 years ago. We had a lot more storms 100 years ago than we do today that actually strike land and damage property. Yeah, they're a little bit stronger. Not much. Not anything to be alarmed over or to say that, oh, this hurricane was caused by climate change. No, it's all a giant grift, folks, and that's all it is. Read some studies. That's what I would tell you. But you will find that, oh, hang on, that study was inconclusive and they cannot derive any sort of advice to give to people other than, hey, let's be good stewards of the planet. Let's keep going.
I wanted to get this in before we get into a lengthy climate change debate. And you were actually at the event in Houston, Texas, where Kamala Harris is on her book tour, and she said this about Trump and his mandate.
It was the tightest, closest presidential election in the 21st century. He does not have a mandate. That is not a mandate. That is not a mandate.
Now, I'm sorry, Jolanda, but Kamala Harris is completely and utterly delusional. You know,
I respectfully disagree.
Well, okay, but let me explain why. Just to remind everybody, Donald Trump won back the White House. He won the popular vote and the Electoral College. The Republicans won control of the Senate and the House. It was a clean sweep. Everything.
But it doesn't make
everything moved to Donald Trump and the Republicans. And yet there is the biggest loser in modern times, running around like she was cheated, like she was on the verge of this amazing victory, when in fact she got absolutely pulverized. She lost every swing state.
She literally did not say she was cheated. Those words came out of your mouth, not hers. I was there. And it was a very close election. And you know what? Whether you win by 1 point, by 1 vote, or whether you win by 100,000 votes, the win is a win. And there was not a mandate. There is not a mandate, which is exactly why we're fighting.
But if you say there's no mandate, you're saying
not a mandate. When Hillary won,
okay, but hang on, Jolanda, what else what else could Donald Trump have won before you concede he has a mandate to be president?
So first of all, no, a mandate to shove stuff down Americans' throats like he's doing, that was not done. He was
elected president of the United States.
I don't disagree with that, unfortunately.
That's the mandate.
But it's not a mandate. And guess what? The beautiful thing about
hang on. What is a mandate then to you?
To me, a mandate is when you win by a lot.
By a lot.
There's a whole bunch of votes separating you. There were not.
But that's not what a mandate is in a democratic society.
Donald Trump is notorious.
That is fake news. A mandate in politics is whether you win or lose an election. And Donald Trump won emphatically.
I don't disagree.
He won by every metric he could possibly have won. He won every swing state. He won the popular and electoral college vote. He won the House. He won the Senate. He won the White House. There was nothing left to win. It was literally the widest mandate imaginable.
And what I will say to you is there was a lot of voter suppression, including here in Texas.
So she was cheated then? You think she was cheated?
You know what else? The Russians interfered in the election.
So it was a rigged election.
She didn't say it. I said it.
So Jolanda, was it a rigged election?
I will continue to fight Donald Trump with everything I have.
Jolanda, you started by saying that at no stage did Kamala say she was cheated. Now you're suggesting she was cheated.
No, I said she didn't say that. I'm telling you what I saw.
Was she cheated or not?
In Texas. Here's what I'm saying to you. What I saw in Texas with my own eyes is shorter voting hours for people who would ordinarily have voted for Kamala, taking away voting on days when people didn't have to go to work.
So she was cheated.
Would have been people who voted for Kamala.
So was she cheated?
So there was active voter suppression.
Was she cheated then?
Which is exactly why they're now redistricting.
I hear you.
Because he knows that next year that
Jolanda,
if we go by what he says, there will be a mandate getting rid of him.
Jolanda, so therefore you're saying she was cheated?
What I'm saying is there were efforts made by the Republicans to suppress votes that would have voted for Kamala.
I heard you, but just to clarify.
So what I said is what I said.
I hear you.
What I said
I hear you.
what I said.
But just to be clear, what you're saying is it was a rigged election then?
What I'm saying is they voter suppressed. That's what I'm saying.
So was it a rigged election?
I said that voter suppression is real and it happened.
But if there was genuine, Jolanda, if there was If there was voter suppression, it was a rigged election. Is that what you're saying?
There was voter suppression. You can make that leap if you want to.
No, you're making the leap. I'm not.
No, you are making the leap. I said exactly what I meant to say, and I'm not going to have you try to beat me down to say what you want me to say.
I'm not trying to beat you down.
Tactics
I'm simply trying to get you to clarify what you're saying.
I have verified what I've said, and there were tactics used to suppress the vote of people who ordinarily would have voted for Kamala and other Democrats.
All right, Joe Walsh.
No, Piers, again, just all due respect to Yolanda. She's wonderful. She didn't run for president last year. Some perspective, we've only had one candidate for president in this nation's history who said an election was rigged, who refused to accept the loss, and who refused to concede. Kamala Harris said Donald Trump won fair and square. She conceded. She showed up at his inauguration. Stop.
Okay, but what about her claim, Kamala's, that it was the closest election this century, implying that somehow she narrowly missed out on power? She didn't.
No, it was, I could be wrong on this. I think Trump's popular vote victory was the fifth smallest since 1900. So it wasn't.
But he didn't even win the popular vote in 2016.
So yes, Pierce, she's exaggerating, or if you want to say lying, that it was the closest.
Right.
But Donald Trump has said it was the biggest win in U.S. history. Come on.
In terms of, then it comes down to how you interpret the word mandate. To me, it is hard to imagine, honestly, it's hard to imagine a wider ranging mandate than that you win by every possible metric that you could possibly win by. That's a mandate.
Well, I agree with you on this. Any winning president has a mandate. I don't care if they win big or small. They won. They get to try to do what they want to do.
Okay.
I love it. These people just refuse to believe the truth on this issue. They absolutely do, and it's fascinating. Donald Trump won, and how could he? The entirety of the corporate press was against Donald Trump. All the mainstream, the cable news, they were against Donald Trump. They were putting out poll after poll after poll after poll saying Kamala Harris is going to win. Kamala Harris is the front runner. Blah, 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 blah. They never got on the ground. They never looked into the methodology of those polls and saw that, hang on, we have an issue here. We got a lot of problems. They want to talk about voter suppression and all this other nonsense. I call that voter integrity, as a matter of fact, not allowing fraud votes to go through, right? There's fraud in every single election. They want to try to make us believe that 2020 was the freest and fairest election in American history, right? No, I'm sorry. No, Democrats, they cheated to win that election. And they did it through legal means. Yes, you can do that. They went around, we know this, I covered this extensively on this channel. They went from state to state to state to state to state to change rules, change laws to prevent Republicans from gaining ground. That's what they did. They did all of it in an effort to give Democrats a leg up. That just so happened to be an election where mail-in voting was the norm, folks. We get out of that, and guess what happens? Democrats lose 10 million votes. Not quite 10 million. What was it? 8 million votes? Where did those 8 million voters go, I wonder? Folks, look, Donald Trump won. He's gained support every single time he's ran for president. All three times he's gained support. He's gained more and more and more votes. And Donald Trump won, and we call it a mandate. We call it a landslide just because of the nuance, if you will, of the political landscape that's currently in this country right now. We're so hyper-polarized, it's surprising that we got as many independent voters to vote for Donald Trump as we did. He has gained a whole hell of a lot of support since 2016. All right, this is a good thing. And you've also got to look at the fact that Kamala Harris brought absolutely nothing to the table. She could not speak, she was not charismatic, and she was short. Those things, and a woman, those things factor in to elections, right? There are people out there that are sexist, that will not vote for a woman for president. Democrats and Republicans alike. But, you know, of course, a Republican's not going to vote for a Democrat woman, of course, just generally speaking. But there's all kinds of factors. Donald Trump should have lost that election. But the fact that, you know, you factor in all those things, that Kamala Harris, she's just a real bad candidate. The party platform itself is insane. Some of their policies are off the charts ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Nonsense. People wanted common sense back. We saw the disaster that was the Biden administration. She was irreparably tied to that administration. People were not going to vote for Joe Biden. Joe Biden would have lost handily. Kamala Harris, therefore, lost handily. Right? They try to blame it on, oh, it's such a short time frame to run a campaign. That's why she didn't win. It doesn't matter how long you would have gave Kamala Harris, she would have never won. Even if she would have come out in 2022 when Donald Trump did, if Joe Biden said, I'm not running again, I give it to Kamala Harris. And if she would have campaigned that entire time, she still would not have won that election. It was just not going to happen for Democrats. They just don't bring any common sense at all. And folks are tired of the lunacy that is coming from the Democratic Party. And look where they're at now. They are lost in the desert with nothing, folks. They have no platform whatsoever, except nonsense. All of it's nonsense. They must say that Donald Trump is a fascist. They have to go with the authoritarian narrative. But it doesn't align with reality. Once again, when you look past the headline, you see that, hang on, there's nothing under the hood. Nothing whatsoever. They'll give you this big, beautiful headline, and they don't give you any substance. All of it, like any story about, oh, Donald Trump's an authoritarian, it's all anonymous sources, made up stuff from the corporate press. There's no substance to any of the really bad headline news. It's all fake news, folks. There's a lot of fake news out there, right? And you might think, well, it can't be all fake. Well, no, it's not. But what they'll do, they'll give you an anonymous source. They'll make up something and then give you some facts to kind of go along with that kind of points in a certain direction. And people buy into it, folks. That's the bifurcation in this country, by the way. People that just appeal to authority and will believe the mainstream without question. They just believe it. I got into an argument today with somebody. What's fascinating about that is he stopped arguing with me as soon as I outed him as a sock puppet. Arguing with me about Tom Homan and that whole situation. You mean to tell me you're defending a guy that took a $50,000 bribe? Well, you go and look into it. Once again, it's an anonymous source. He was supposedly caught on an audio tape accepting a $50,000 bribe. This happened under the Biden administration, by the way. They didn't arrest him when he accepted the bribe. What are you talking about? The whole news story came out because Emil Bove dropped the investigation into this, saying it was completely baseless. Right? And then supposedly this audio tape, which they didn't provide the evidence at all. They didn't provide the audio tape of this. There was no $50,000 that they could show. Once again, if it happened, why didn't they arrest Tom Homan at the time? It doesn't make any sense. They try to make the excuse, oh, it's because the reason he took the bribe was because he was offering he was going to dole out these contracts to specific people. That's why he took the bribe. Are you kidding me? The guy does not have anything to do with doling out contracts to anybody. He's in an advisor role, has no power whatsoever in the federal government. He cannot say anything about any contracts. That has to be sewn up by somebody else. Somebody else would have to do that. And they would have to do the due diligence, run through all the proper channels to give out a contract to anybody. Right? None of it made any sense at the time. None of it still makes any sense. This guy just kept arguing with me. And he could not, for the life of him, bless his heart, could not understand what anonymous source was. I said, where's your source for this? MSNBC. No. Where's their source for this? Crickets. Crickets. That's all you get from these people. They just buy into the narrative. That's it. And they will vehemently defend that position. He kept accusing me of being in a bubble. Like, once again, my dude, look at as to what I do, right? I read left-wing news all day long. I go through Reddit, for crying out loud, which is heavily left-wing bias. I read those comments. I see what the left is saying. That's the opposite of being in a bubble. I have my opinions because they are my own. I don't have my opinions because somebody else gave them to me. I hardly ever listen to any right-wing podcasters or anything like that, especially ever since I started doing this. I don't have time for that. Absolutely. Outside of researching the news and going through and finding clips to do, and like this show right here, you know, I pretty much respond to debates of people arguing both sides and give my opinion on it, like based upon the news that I cover, essentially. It's fascinating, huh? That's like the opposite of being in a bubble. I'm all over the damn place. Just because my opinion lies in a certain direction doesn't mean that I'm insulated from other opinions. No, I hear other opinions all day long, and I knock them down all day long. It is what it is, folks, but I've rambled on for long enough. I want you guys to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comments section, because I'd love to argue back and forth. If you disagree, I'd love to have that argument. We can debate it out, folks. So y'all do all that. Y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. And if you would, I would be deeply appreciative if you guys would click that join button, sign up, and become a member. That's the best way to help this channel expand and grow. But without any further ado, folks, it's the end. That's it. You guys remember that God has a plan for everybody, and he loves each and every one of you out there. So y'all try to have a good day and stay legitical. Peace.